Pork ribs. Usually something you associate with grilling in the summer. But summer's over and I've got a hankering for ribs. So I'm gonna show you how to make the most incredible sticky honey soy ribs in the oven in half the time. And obviously, it starts with pork ribs. Because today we're sponsored by the National Pork Board. Now what I've got here are St. Louis style pork ribs, which are the same as spare ribs. The only difference is there's an excess piece of meat that kind of hangs beyond the actual ribs. And the reason it's called St. Louis style ribs is that in barbecue, to make a nice uniform, better looking rack of ribs, they would trim off that excess part of meat, which is basically just made up of the breastbone and cartilage. So you get this better looking, kind of squared off piece of meat, hence the name St. Louis style ribs. Now, if you got spare ribs or baby back ribs, those work fine as well. Now, what you want to look for when shopping is nice marbleization. You want to see some nice fat running through the meat. And you also want to make sure that the bones are covered by meat. You're not have any of that bone exposed. That's not a good rack you want to pick. This looks nice and pretty. It's already been trimmed in St. Louis style. All we have to do, since we're gonna cook this in the oven, in a Dutch oven, we're gonna turn these into like rib singles, individual ribs with the meat around them. This is gonna help those ribs cook faster. Now I'm just using my finger to find the meat sitting in between the bones of the ribs. That is where I'm going to cut, and I'm gonna try and make my cut as center as possible to get as much meat on every rib as I can. Find the meat in between the bones and just run your knife all the way down that meat. Then I'm just gonna toss some olive oil on there just as like a binder. Then I'm gonna season it generously with some salt. Then just like a very small amount of Chinese 5-spice powder. And with just a little bit goes a long way with this. So I'm just gonna rub that onto the ribs, and those are ready to just hang out for a minute. Now it's just gonna sit there and marinate, I don't know, 20 minutes or something while I prep the rest of the ingredients. You can go ahead and cook these right away. Now that that's marinating, we can make the brazing liquid that we're going to cook those ribs in. Starts with 3/4 of a cup of soy sauce, followed by 3/4 of a cup of mirin, juice of an orange, juice of 2 limes, then a whole head of garlic. Smash them, slice them in half, and then remove the paper. Then a knob of ginger. I'm just gonna use my knife and scrape the skin off. Safer to use a spoon for sure, but I don't have a spoon in my hand right now. And just slice it thin. Straight into the bowl with the garlic. Then to the soy mixture, I'm gonna go in with a tablespoon or so, maybe 2, sriracha, and then 3/4 of a cup of honey. Then I'm just gonna take some green onions, just tear them right in. So now my brazing liquid is ready. The only other thing I'm gonna add to it is water once everything gets into the pot. You got that honey in there, so you're gonna need a spatula to make sure you get all that stuff out when you add it to the ribs. Now to cook the ribs, we're going to be using a Dutch oven. So I'm gonna get that on some high heat, add a little olive oil to the pan, and once it's hot, I'm gonna start to add a few ribs at a time, meat side down, in the pot, and we're gonna sear them and let them brown. We wanna develop a really nice caramelization on those like 3 main sides of the ribs. We don't need the bone seared. Once they're seared, pull them out of the pan, sear off any other batches you might have, and once all your meat is browned, we want to discard that excess oil and then toss that ginger and garlic into the pan. We're going to take a little bit of that oil we discarded, add it back in to cook the garlic and ginger, a little bit of salt. Once that garlic and ginger becomes aromatic and starts to brown slightly, then we can go ahead and add our brazing liquid. Make sure you get all that honey in the pot. Then we can go ahead and add the ribs back to the pan, and then we're just going to take some water and fill up the pot until it just slightly covers the ribs. Then we want to bring that pot up to a boil, get a lid on, and we're going to pop that into the oven. Now those are going to go into the oven and they're going to cook at 300 degrees for about an hour. And with ribs, they're safe to eat at 145, but they're not that good because they're tough. You really want to cook them to 180 degrees or beyond for them to be exceptionally good. And if you want to visit pork.org, the sponsor of this video, to learn more about pork temperature, I'm going to leave a link down in the description. After an hour, we're going to pull them out of the oven and we're going to give them a check. And I'm going to use a little cake tester just to check for tenderness, and they seem to be good. And then we're gonna raise the temperature to 425 degrees and brown them in the oven uncovered. So now we're gonna let those cook uncovered for 30 more minutes. I don't want them to disintegrate. I want them to melt in my mouth, but still have a little tiny bit of bite to them. Next up, we can prepare a few garnishes. I've got a Fresno chili here. This is gonna add a little color and a little bit of heat, but like some nice fruity flavorful heat. Slice it real thin. I'm gonna take some cilantro leaves. I'm just gonna pick some. And And then we have our garnishes. These are gonna add various layers of color, flavor, textures. So these are ready to go, and then the only other thing we have to do is make a barbecue sauce. And we're gonna start with like a barbecue sauce, add a few of these Asian-y ingredients to it, and then pull in some of that brazing liquid and have that all come together into like a blend of an American barbecue sauce and sort of like an Asian barbecue sauce. So first up, we start with ketchup. About a cup of ketchup. Then goes in a tablespoon or two of some mustard, another tablespoon or two of sriracha. Get a little heat into the hot sauce. Tablespoon or two of some honey, a little bit of rice vinegar for some of that acid and tang, Worcestershire sauce, and then what some call the Asian barbecue sauce, some hoisin. Tablespoon or two of that. We'll give that a whisk. Nice and round. I'm getting that little tickle in the throat from the acid, but it's balancing out with sweetness. It's nice. It's gonna get even better when we add in the brazing liquid. So I'm gonna start to warm this up on the stove. And once I pull the ribs out, I'm gonna take some of that brazing liquid and add it to it. Now the ribs have been cooking in the oven uncovered for 15 minutes. So I just wanna pull them out. I wanna check them. They're looking good. Pull some of the ones from the bottom that aren't getting color, pull them up to the top, pop them back in the oven and try and get those other pieces nice and browned. And after 30 minutes cooked uncovered, we can pull them out and everything should be just like a bit more caramelized in that pot. For the sake of curiosity, I'm gonna temp them and they're around 200, which is perfect. So what I'm gonna do is then take our barbecue sauce with a little bit of a strainer and I'm gonna pull in about 1 or 2 ladles of the brazing liquid into the barbecue sauce. And then we're gonna put that cover back on the ribs and allow them to steam and rest for 30 minutes while our barbecue sauce cooks. I'm gonna stir all those ingredients together and it's a little loose. So what I'm gonna do is salt it, stir it, and let it cook and down and reduce until it's darkened and thick, like a glossy, glazy barbecue sauce. After 30 minutes, we can take the ribs out of the pot and they look gorgeous. Now look, I'm not tooting my own horn or anything, but that's a nice looking rib, especially for the oven. Get out of town. Now we can take our barbecue sauce and just sort of lacquer the ribs up, glaze them real nice, and then we're ready to plate. Now you can lay these out, or like me, I like to kind of stack them in like a tower in a bowl. Kind of gives me more chicken wing vibes. Then a tiny bit more of the barbecue sauce, then some sesame seeds, then on with those Fresnos and banana peppers, beautiful color there. Then goes on some cilantro leaves, strategically placed, and then finally the crispy onions for texture. And then I like to add a little lime wedge here and there. That acidity sprinkled on top is beautiful. Now that's a good looking rib. This is called the bite test. It should not fall off the bone when you take a bite. Your bite mark should be intact. That is how competition ribs are judged. Look, there's only bangers on my channel, but then sometimes there's like banger bangers, and this is one of those. It's acidic, it's spicy. Squeeze a little lime juice on top too to just add that fresh dimension on at the end. It hits everything I want in ribs, and all it's missing is the smoke and the hassle. Recipe's gonna be down in the description. Visit pork.org for more cooking ideas and inspiration. That's all that I have today. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care of yourself and go feed yourself.